Hi there everyone. Today I'm going to be reviewing the brand new Flywoo Cinerace20. I'm going to be taking you through every feature of this quad on the bench. Then we're going to be looking at some stock flight footage and seeing if there's any parts of the tune that we might be able to improve. Then I'm going to be taking you through my filter and PID settings for the quad and giving you my conclusions on what I think of it. And then right at the end I'm going to show you some flight footage with the quad on my tune. There are timestamps in the video description, so let's get into it. So let's take a look at this 2-inch Cinewhoop on the bench. The frame is constructed from two carbon fibre plates, 1.5mm thick, a slightly narrower one on the top, and a slightly thicker one on the bottom that the flight controller is mounted to. Those two plates secure the rest of the frame together. Now, the rest of the frame is all injection moulded plastic. And the ducts come as two halves. Each half has an aluminium standoff installed, and when you put them together, you can screw down into that standoff from the top and screw up into it from the bottom. I really like this solution because I think that these standoffs are a lot less likely to strip out than if you were screwing directly into the plastic. The motors on this frame are Flywoo motors, and they are 1203 in size, 3400 kV. Which is just right for 4S on 2-inch props. The props they're using are Gemfan 51mm props, and they are 5-blade props. So you get quite a lot of thrust out of this prop for its diameter because of those 5 blades, and that allows the frame to carry a little bit more weight. It can carry a battery and a naked camera, so something like a naked GoPro, an Insta360 SMO 4K, or an Insta360 Go, for example. All of that's possible, and those cameras all mount into this camera mount here. And Flywoo provide 3D prints for different types of cameras with the frame. I think this one's for an Insta360 Go, or maybe a Go 2, and then there's also ones for the SMO 4K, a naked GoPro. So there's quite a lot of different options there. The camera on this frame is the Cadex Polar Nano, and I think this is the best looking nano-sized camera for DJI FPV that you can get today. You'll see later on that the image quality from the FPV camera really is quite excellent, and a nano-sized camera is definitely the right choice for this form factor of frame. The camera is really well protected at the front. You've got this injection moulded camera mount, but it's also been reinforced with some carbon fibre plates here and an aluminium standoff. So that should provide quite a lot of protection for the camera should you happen to have a front crash with this frame. All the ducts are also protected with this EVA foam. So that should protect not only the ducts themselves, but also anything that you might crash into if you're flying around people or animals, and you won't risk causing any harm because that foam is nice and soft. The VTX that I have in this version of the frame is the Cadex Vista, which is connected to this lollipop antenna out the back. And one of the first things I did when I got the frame was I shortened this antenna down a bit because it was quite long. And I know that long antennas can cause vibration problems. So I just shortened it down a little bit, which is very easy to do. You can even just push it down a bit further into the mount, and that will make it a bit shorter. The receiver that I have on this frame is the Express LRS. I think it's the EP1 receiver. And it's connected to this little T-shaped antenna, which is mounted on this 3D print here. And this is going to give you loads more range than you could ever need on this little quad. I think you would struggle to outfly this on with the battery life that the quad has. So the flight controller used in this quad is the Flywoo Goku F405 20 amp flight controller. It's an all-in-one 25 by 25mm board. And although it's only an F4 flight controller, it has a black box chip on it. And that means that you're actually able to tune this quad properly. And an F4 flight controller with black box is always going to end up flying better than an F7 without, because you're just able to get it all dialed in. One thing that I really like about how this quad is laid out is that they have a vertical USB port here. I think this is really the best way to mount the USB port for these all-in-one style flight controllers, because it's relatively easy to put a cutout in the bottom plate, and then you have good access to that USB port to plug in the cable to configure the quad. And this is much better than having it on the side and trying to get it in through past the ducts, which is pretty much impossible. They weren't quite able to achieve the same thing with the Vista unit. You can see that I've had to just cut out a little bit of a notch there, and that allows me to fit in. I've got a right-angled USB-C connector, which I can fit in there. So if you have a right-angled USB-C, you might also want to just gently cut away this part of the duct here, and it doesn't affect flight performance. So you'll be fine to just trim that away and have easier access for doing firmware updates or anything like that on your Calyx Vista. Another neat little feature to mention is that this little board you can see slotted down here is actually a Bluetooth board. So you can configure the flight controller over Bluetooth if you want to. Although, given how easy it is to access this USB port, I'm thinking I'll probably just plug it in. But if you're someone who likes to configure their flight controller from the phone over Bluetooth, then Flywoo have got you covered here. Let's get the quad on the scales and see how much it weighs. So the dry weight for the DJI version is 118 grams. If you add an Insta360 to that, it's 154 grams. And if you use the 300 milliamp hour 4S, it's 196 grams. With the 550 that I flew with, it's 222 grams. And if you were to use the 900 milliamp hour battery without the Insta360, it comes in at about 200. So I wouldn't want to go too much heavier than a 550 with this quad. It was feeling just about right with the Insta360 camera and the 550 milliamp hour pack. That was feeling pretty good, and it's still comfortably below the 250 gram limit. And that's fine for cruising around. You probably wouldn't want to freestyle with this much weight, but that's not what this quad is designed for. Okay, so let's look now at some footage taken with the stock tune on the Cinerace20. And overall, I was pretty happy with how the stock tune flew. There's not really any bounce back on these sharp rolls, but you do see some prop wash and some shaking in descents, which we're going to look at. When cruising through the foliage here, you can really see what this drone and this tune was designed to accomplish. It's really quite smooth as we cruise slowly around these trees. There's a little bit of jello and shaking, which I think can be improved a little bit, but overall it's really demonstrating good performance. On these punch outs we get again a little bit of oscillation, a little bit of jello, a bit of shaking, and the shaking is quite bad on quick descents, and I'm going to show you some settings which should address that. But yeah, overall pretty good stock tune. Now the first thing we're going to want to do is update the ESC on the Cinerace20 from BL Heli S to BL Heli M to enable bidirectional Dshot. Now to do that, we're going to use BL Heli M configurator. I'll put a link in the video description to where you can download that. Once you open the software, you're going to want to connect to your ESC and read setup. And you'll need a battery plugged into the ESC to do this. And then you're going to want to go to Flash All and select version 16.9 BL Heli M official. The target for the ESC should be correct and you shouldn't need to change that. And then click Flash. Once the flashing process is complete, these are the settings that I recommend for the ESC. So you can pause the video and set those as I've got them here. 96k PWM, async PWM for commutation enhancement, feed forward off, and a timing of medium high. And I think everything else is at the defaults. Once you've set the settings correctly, you can click Write Setup, and that should update the ESC. And then just disconnect. The next thing to do is to check that bidirectional Dshot is working. So go into Betaflight, go into the Configuration tab, tick bidirectional Dshot, and set the number of motor poles to 12 for these motors. And then save and reboot. And then go into the Motors tab and just check that when you run the motors up, you get some RPM values there. I'm getting about 500. And you want 0% errors. Once that's done, we're going to want to set up our filters. So go into the PID tuning tab and the filter settings, and we're going to use my recommendations for a clean build. So we're going to turn off all the gyro low pass filters, apart from one gyro low pass PT1 type at 1000 Hz. And that's an anti-aliasing filter that's recommended when you're running a 4K PID loop. RPM filtering on, and dynamic notch filter 0, 250, 150, 600. And the D-term low pass filter, a static D-term low pass of 100 Hz, and the type is a biquad. And we're just going to hit save. And then we're going to want to go and set up our PID profile settings. Now the main setting that we want to change here that is going to really help with those shakes as we're descending is the dynamic idle value. And for a 2-inch prop, a really good dynamic idle value is 50 or 5000 RPM. So we're going to set that. And then you can also adjust your sliders as I have them here, which is master multiplier to 2.0, PD balance to 1.2, which is what the Flywoo stock setting was. And P&D gain, I found it was good at 1.2 when the quad wasn't carrying a camera. But when you're carrying a camera, you can push it up even a little bit more, maybe up to 1.5. For stick response gain, I would suggest for Cinewhoop style flying, leaving this at 1 or maybe even turning it down to 0.5 is something that you might want to do. If this were more of an aggressive freestyle quad, I would be advising you to turn it up to get a sharper set point tracking response. But I don't think it's necessary here. And make sure D-min is turned off. The next thing to tune is our motor idle throttle percent, and you always want to tune this when you set dynamic idle. So we have dynamic idle set to 5000 RPM, and we're going to want to find the motor idle throttle percent that gives 20% more RPMs than that, so 6000 RPM. So we're going to go back into our motors tab, and we're going to run up the motors to 6000 RPM, which for this quad is 1135. So 1135. We're going to ignore the 1000 and just say 135. And then we're going to divide 135 by 10, and that's going to give us 13.5%. And that's what we're going to type into our motor idle throttle value. And then save and reboot. So it's time for the conclusion, and time for me to tell you what I think of the Flywoo Cinerace20. And I think that this version is an absolutely fantastic 2-inch Cinewhoop. I love the Caddx Polar Nano camera. I think it looks so much better than the Nebula Nano. I love that it comes with an Express LRS receiver. It's a really well-built, solidly built frame that takes a great tune and a camera mount that is just perfect for mounting an Insta360 Go or a naked camera. And it comes even with a little power cable so that you can power a naked camera really easily. The flight controller on it, okay, it's only an F4, but it has a black box chip. So you can actually tune this quad. And I don't think F4s fly any differently to F7s in my experience. It's really a complete package. And I'm really impressed with what Flywoo has managed to accomplish here. If you're interested in trying one out for yourself, I'll put a link down in the video description. It'll be an affiliate link, which means that if you do choose to buy this or any other product after clicking that link, I do get a small commission. Doesn't cost you anything, and it helps support the channel. So I'd really appreciate it if you'd use that. I'll leave you with a little bit more flight footage, which is from my final tune on the quad. Take a look, see what you think, and let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions on how I can make it even better. Also let me know in the comments what you think of the Caddx Polar Nano camera. I know it's only 60 frames per second and 16:9 aspect ratio, but doesn't it look good though? I think it's just perfect for cinewhooping around these trees. Until next time, wish you all very, very happy flying.
Oh, we ran out of music, but there's still loads of flight footage left. Yeah, this little guy will fly for a long time. I'm talking like 7-8 minutes on a 550 mAh. Probably only 5 or 6 if you're carrying a naked GoPro, but still, for a 2-inch, that's pretty impressive. Get subscribed, and I'll see you in the next one.